You're listening to Cannonball Mindset, a podcast dedicated to helping people achieve the most out of their personal and professional lives. The Cannonball Mindset challenges you to step out of your comfort zone and lean into the possibility of having a life of abundance. Disruptors, innovators, and groundbreakers are all welcome. Let's get into the show.
Welcome back to the Cannonball Mindset, and we have a subject today that's really near and dear to my heart. Those of you who have followed me or listened to me know that I coached my daughter's basketball team for years. They're now in college, so I don't get to coach anymore, not in the same way anyway. But coaching the basketball team, was amazing. But there was really no guide to how to become a youth sports coach. Most people, at least for my way, I just jumped in because of a moment that happened, and I wish I would have had this book then. I had it in their last year of me coaching their team. A good friend of mine, Kelly Dunn, had recommended this book. I read it, and it was amazing. And John O'Sullivan is the author. We'll talk about this book. He has a new upcoming book, but if you coach kids sports, or really if you just coach anything in life, This is a podcast you want to listen to. John is the founder of Changing the Game Project. The mission of the Changing the Game Project is to ensure that we return youth sports, I love this, return youth sports to our children and put play back in play ball. We want to provide the most influential adults in our children's lives, their parents and coaches, with the information and resources they need to make sports healthy, positive, and rewarding experience for their children and their whole family. John is also the host of a really good podcast. I got to listen to some episodes this week. He has over 300 episodes recorded, which I can tell you as a podcast host is no small feat, with amazing coaches, amazing athletes. It's called The Way of the Champions podcast. It's unbelievable. Make sure you check that out. He's the author of Changing the Game, Every Moment Matters. And he has a new book called The Champion Teammate. So, John, thanks for coming on.
Oh, thanks for that wonderful introduction. That was very kind of you.
It's true. I got to tell you, I have twin daughters. They're 18 now, but I'm 6'8". You can't tell by sitting down. So I grew up my whole life playing basketball, and I have these twin daughters, and they were 6 years old, 6 going on 7. They were playing youth basketball. And they had a coach who was just awful. And when I mean awful, very demoralizing, very shame-driven. So he would shame the girls. And I sat there through a whole season going, what do? Do I pull my kids off of this? Do I not? And then I said, at the end of the year, I said, listen, you can't let this guy coach anymore. I went to the league and I said, you can't let this guy coach anymore. These are young, impressionable girls. And he's ruining not just the game, but he's ruining their programming. And you either have to have the courage to step up and do it yourself, or kind of pipe down. And so I stepped up, but there was no book like this at the time. And those of you, this book, when I read it, was like, man, where was this book 15 years ago when I needed it, or 10 years ago when I needed it? So, John, thanks for coming on, and tell us a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into how you become this, youth sports guru coach.
Well, I don't like the word guru or anything like that. I think there's so many good people out there doing amazing work, and Jerry Lynch, my podcast co-host, we often talk about, he says, I'm like the flute, and all the air, all this ideas from all these other great people comes in, and I just try to make it sound pretty coming out the other end. And so that's what we do. But I grew up, I'm 51 now. I grew up in New York on Long Island, and like most of my friends played every sport that you could play, and then finally settled on soccer. And then I was a collegiate soccer player, and then played professionally for a little while. I had a couple bad injuries, and so I got into coaching, and I coached Division I college for 4 years, and then really just found my niche, and I loved youth coaching, and I've been doing that ever since. So I'm getting close to 30 years of coaching here at this point, and everything from 4-year-olds to a WPSL women's head coach and Division I NCAA and everything in between. And I still coach a group of 8 and 9-year-olds right now, and I still coach a 16-year-old boys team. And so I love coaching. I love being around the game, and I really see sport as this incredible vehicle to teach people to function well in life if we use it the right way.
Yeah, I love that. So when did you know that you had a coach's heart, or like this is something that really you were drawn to? Was it when you were a player? Did you have a affinity for watching how people coached, or was it a moment? I had a moment that said, "Oh, I better step in." I own a multi-million-dollar consulting company, corporate coaching. I never thought about translating it to youth sports. Was there a moment, or was this was always a pull for you?
It was funny when I graduated from college in the spring of 1994. My high school, big Catholic high school in Long Island, needed a JV soccer coach, and I was getting ready to move to Colorado, and but I had a couple months, and so they asked me to come coach. And I was like, okay, fair enough. I'll go coach. I didn't think much of it. I was like, well, I played, so clearly I can coach, which was, my first mistake. But I really liked it. I really enjoyed it. And I did a lot of things really, really poorly. But I think what I did well was I was super passionate. I was very authentic. I wore my heart on my sleeve. And the kids, even in the moments where maybe I wasn't great, they knew that I cared. They knew that I cared about them and for their team. And so I just got a taste of it, and I liked it. But like I said, I was still playing. But while you were playing, I was doing a little coaching on the side, coaching some teams. And then that same high school teacher who got me to coach at my alma mater became principal of a school in Raleigh, North Carolina. And he said, I need a varsity soccer coach now. And so I was down there playing soccer, and I said, yeah, I'll try it. And I ended up doing it for 3 years, and, turning a program that was, 4-20 the year I got there, around that a couple of years later, they were, even after I left, they became the state champions, but we sort of set the foundation. And that's when I really fell in love with coaching and felt like, oh, this was something I might do. And I actually, when I graduated, college, I took my LSATs and I was going to go to law school, and I decided to move for the winter to Vail, Colorado, and we had 500 inches of snow, and I decided at that point that I was definitely not going to law school. And and then the soccer piece came along, and so yeah, I just really kind of fell in love with coaching and the impact that you could make. And I didn't really want to be a high school teacher. That didn't interest me as much. I just liked the sports side of it.
Yeah, and so at what point did you decide? Okay, I love what I'm doing. I have a knack for it. I'm gonna figure out. I'm authentic, and I'm having impact. Did you decide? All right, I'm gonna now be an author. Now had author to my resume.
That was actually at a point of burnout from coaching. I was pretty burned out. I was tired. I was running an organization, and sort of I still love the coaching, but everything else, the politics, the parents, the lack of gratitude, and I was looking for like a parent education program, maybe much like you were, right? Yeah. In the same thing of like, what can I hand my parents so that they can understand the journey of their kids? And I couldn't really find it. And I said, well, I've been doing this a long time. I've coached a lot of kids and had them go on to great success. So I've seen what it takes to get to the top. And I've also seen a lot of kids quit. Let me just, my kids were 5 and 6 as well. And, I wanted to be home a little bit more. So I wrote the book, Changing the Game, and, did it all backwards. I wrote the book first, and I knew, I thought I was like, I think I want to be a speaker. I like public speaking and all that. And so I wrote the book, and then realized it's actually not. It's not that hard to write a book, to be honest. It's really hard to sell a book, and so I started a blog, and the blog is really what took off, and we got a big social media presence in those days when Facebook was a functional platform and all that, and that's really what took off and led to a TED Talk and then a podcast and
Then,
two books since.
then it picks up momentum. Can you explain the key concepts behind the ideas of changing the game, and why it was so important to address these issues in sports, in youth sports and youth development?
Well, sort of like the mission statement of Changing the Game project was that youth sport has, I mean, even since I wrote that, it's much bigger, right? But I mean, right now, youth sport is a bigger industry than the NFL. I mean, it's a multi tens of billions of dollar industry right now, and so the business of sport has overtaken the needs of children in sport. So it used to be about, like you were talking about with your daughters, like why would a coach of kids that young be shaming children? Well, only if your only goal is we have to win this 7-year-old basketball game, right? And so I think that is the thing where sport has become about the needs and values and priorities of adults and not necessarily of the children playing. Now, this is not to say that I love competition. I think competition's great. And it's also not to say that it shouldn't be demanding. It should be demanding. It should be hard. It should be challenging. Kids actually like that. It just shouldn't be demeaning like it was for your daughters, right? It shouldn't be humiliation. It shouldn't be shaming, and it shouldn't be focused on the winning because, the kids, they like to win, they want to win, but as you know, right? 2 minutes after the game, all they want to know is like, what's for lunch or what's the snack? That's it.
That's that's exactly right. And it's interesting because I think that I never thought about it, but you're right. I'm saying youth sports has to be way out revenue or generate more revenue than NFL or any professional sports. But let me ask, I want to go back and unpack something you said. And you said it's become about the adults. It's become about the parents. What do you mean by that?
Well, I think, number one, that sport is a reflection of society, without a doubt, right? And so we've had this transition, right, when I was growing up, like my mom had a business, but she was home a lot with us. And then all of a sudden, a lot of moms were also working. And so we went from, kids playing together. I think it was like the early 90s or something when the word play date became part of the Webster's dictionary, right? When you scheduled to play. And then if you're going to schedule play, then all of a sudden you start organizing it. And well, if we're going to schedule it and organize it, then we might as well hire someone to run it, right? And so sport just kind of went down this path of let's find organized, scheduled someone to run things for our kids to do. And then we just started filling their day. Right. And then people who are making, this is not a criticism of the people because there's amazing coaches out there who make a living from coaching or, whatever. But like if I build an ice rink, then to support my business and pay my bills, I need kids to play hockey 12 months a year.
Right.
Even if I know that that's not good for the kids playing hockey. And so when we allow the business of sport to run to make the rules of sport, all of a sudden the rules are going to reflect what's good for the business and not what's good for a child, which is a multi-movement childhood, which is trying different things, being on different teams, having free time to be creative and not being told at 6 or 7 years old, if you want to be on this basketball team or you want to be on this soccer team, this is the only sport you play. And that's what's happening over and over and over. And that's not based on science. That's not based on psychology. There's no one who will tell you this is the best thing for a kid. And so this is what we're trying to combat, and really to give parents the courage sometimes to say no. Like, no, this is not the right thing for our family at this moment.
Yeah. It's hard. I gotta tell
really
you,
hard.
It's because it's being bombarded. It's what I've learned. My daughters are now in college, but we have and they attend University of Alabama, where sport is everything at University of Alabama. And what I see is a lot of their friends, their lives, their identity become the sport. And the sport
Mhm.
is going to end at some point. You know, the
Mhm.
statistics of you making a living as an athlete, of a living as an athlete past college or even past high school is small, to say the least. And so,
Mhm.
but their identity becomes really the sport, and they're them as a position player, not as a person.
Mhm.
How do you combat that? How do you get people, because there's a large majority of people that are saying, well, no, sport is such a great indication of life. Life has winners and it has losers and it has adversity and it has challenges, and where we're making our kids soft by not putting them early in their age in this state of competition. What do you say to that, or how do you combat that?
Well, I'm not going to disagree with maybe this idea that we're making our kids soft, or that I think it's pretty much universally agreed on now by social scientists that the self esteem movement that started in the United States was an absolute disaster, right? And this was not a good thing for children, because it's not the real world, and you don't give people resiliency and agency and things like that by telling them everything they do is the greatest thing ever. And so I don't, all the things that you just mentioned, Chad, like that, dealing with losing or failure or struggle or doing something hard, that can all exist in a sport environment where I still play three sports. That can all exist in the thing where I get 2 months off in the summer to go be a child, and my family can go on vacation and camp instead of being told, because these are the stories that I get, right? You can't go to grandma's 90th birthday party. We have a tournament. We'll kick you off the team if you go,
Right.
right? Families shouldn't have to make that decision.
Yeah.
And so, I think, one of the things, like you said, you're 6'8", so you gave your daughters certain genetics that no amount of practice in the world can make you taller,
Right.
right? Or whatever. And so genetics is kind of like our ceiling in sport, and that's a part of it. And then we had this sort of mythology that you could just, practice your way to anything, and we had 10,000 hours, which of course is a complete myth. And so
That
we
everybody
we
that
had
everybody buys into, but
but everyone, because it's a catchy phrase, right? And it makes
the
sense. And no
science.
one's saying that practice doesn't matter. Of course, practice is the single greatest thing that we can control. But there's all these other factors that we don't control, right? If were born in, South, West Africa, you're probably not going to be a professional skier, right? It's just, so environment matters, genetics matter, all these things play into it. And so I think, what's happened is, the adults just need to take a step back and say, how do I make this a human development environment, right? How do I make this something that's great for children, that I just use basketball or I use soccer or I use baseball as a vehicle to develop great human beings? And if by chance they have the genetics and the luck and the drive and the grit and the resilience to be really good, well, sweet. Then I got out of the way and allowed them to do that. And that's what I think a good sporting environment is all about. And, I've been coaching long enough now that I've had numerous players invite me to their weddings, and no one's ever done that because I taught them how to kick a ball, right? Or the 4-3-3 formation. It's like they did it because you made me believe in myself. You inspired me. You were a great mentor. You were a great role model. And I think that's what we need from the adults in sport.
Yeah. I couldn't agree. I could not agree more. Um, do you do you, do you believe that the role of parents, forget the coaches. We haven't talked about coaches yet. We will, but the role of parents needs to evolve when it comes to youth sports. Like, what's the role of the parents in this whole mix? you know,
Well, I mean, I think parents have a critical role, but sometimes that role is getting out of the way and trusting the coach or the organization. I mean, I'm a parent as well. You know, my kids are a little younger than yours. They'll be a senior and junior in high school next year, and so I've lived this journey as the parent of athletes, and I've lived this journey as a coach, through many others, and so I really think that the single biggest thing driving so many parents is sort of fear and the need to keep up with the Joneses, right? And much different than your parents or my parents growing up, they didn't have a public forum where everyone could see what the best 8-year-old in the world did in swimming or soccer or whatever. And so you could just be a parent, right? And it wasn't like, yeah, you could go to their game, but it wasn't like this mass failure of, oh my God, look at my DNA struggling out there. How bad am I as a parent? So we have this comparative society where everyone posts all their wins. Like no one puts their 8th place medal on Facebook, right? And so you're bombarded with, look at everyone else's kids going to this college, how perfect, how great. But that's like front of the house. Like behind the scenes, everyone's a mess, right? Everyone's a mess backstage, but there's so much societal pressure to do what everyone else is doing, even if that's not your kid's journey. And so like one of the big things I write about in Changing the Game is that I think every family should have a youth sports mission statement. What is the purpose of youth sport for our family? And I don't think for most people it's, get a scholarship at all costs, no matter the physical, mental, and emotional toll on my child. I don't think that's what most people want, right? I want a well-rounded human being who learns to be a great teammate and work with others and learns respect and hard work and dealing with disappointment and surrounded by good people. Well, if I have that mission statement, then start at the end and work backwards and think long-term. If this is what I want at 22, 24 years old, what do I need today to get me there? And I think when people don't do that, you just look, well, what's going to be the best for the next 6 months? Well, my kid might be a better soccer player, but if she's got an eating disorder, what was the point?
All right. That's exactly right. And I think the idea of what I see, and maybe my perspective is skewed, but that parents are reliving their own youth or their missed youth through their children. Listen, I'm 6'8". I never went to college. I regret not playing basketball in college, not going to college. But there was never a thought in my mind of that somehow I will force my kids to play basketball. They played soccer, they played basketball, and they played other sports. And some they loved, and some they didn't. And when they didn't like it, they didn't play it anymore. But I never tried to live vicariously through my children in my sport. But and again, maybe my perspective is skewed, but I see this a lot now. It's Mike, and they don't say it, but in their actions sometimes show it. Do you see that?
Yeah, I see that, and I think I think a lot of that is also caused, right? If you think about the massive financial demands that youth sport often places now, and then the time commitment demands, parents invest a lot in their kids. They're forced to. And so they want a return on that investment. And the easiest way to look at that return is, did we win this weekend, right? Versus what's the long-term return of human development. And so, we saw this with the U.S. gymnastics scandal and all these poor young girls who were, abused by a doctor, and all these parents that just kept them in the system, and they were abused by the Carolis as coaches, and but there's the Olympics, there's that Olympic goal, it's worth it at any price. And I think so many of those people now have horrible regrets because of what happened to their kids. And so one of my friend Sky always says this: we can't use the tiny number of bad parents as an excuse not to engage with the good ones. And I truly believe that the vast majority of parents are great people, and they have the best interests of their kids in mind. And sometimes we all love our kids in unhelpful ways. But I think if we reach out as coaches and we communicate, and parents know that we have the best interest of their child in mind, then they react accordingly. And as a coach, I know it's my job to, if I'm coaching your kids, we start with a zero balance. I have to do things to build up a balance in my trust account with you. And if I build that balance and make your kids better and connect, and they come home smiling, and I'm talking to them and giving you feedback, and you see them blossoming, then the days that I screw up, I make a little withdrawal, your balance isn't zero. You're like, well, John, you've done a lot for my kids. What'd you say today? Can we talk about this? And I think that's what a lot of coaches start with, zero balance, and they immediately start making withdrawals, and then the parents turn on them really quickly.
Yeah, I think, I agree. I did read a book, probably my fourth year into coaching, and it served me well in my corporate company, but also in coaching my kids. It's called the Matheny Manifesto.
Yeah, it's great.
It was such a great book, and it forced me. The immediately when I read that, I sat down, and I wrote my own manifesto, and that became my mission statement, my creed of what my expectations were for your children, what my expectations were for you, and also what you can expect from me, and that you can call me out on it. You think that that's needed more by coaches to set clear expectations of who they are, why they're doing this, what they can expect, and what they're going to expect of their players and parents?
Yeah, 100%. You should lay out your philosophy of, who you are, what are the expectations around the commitment, around playing time, what are the expectations for the parents around, how to cheer, how to behave and act on the sideline, right? If you're coaching 10-year-old soccer, the referee's probably 12. Right? You're in developmental soccer, so you're going to get a developmental referee. Why are you going to scream at him or her for a mistake?
Yeah, right.
Right? You don't scream at your kid for a mistake. Well, of course the referee is going to mess up. They're 12, right? They're just learning as well. And so, I think all that stuff is super important. I loved first his letter. I read his letter before his book, and then I love Mike Matheny's book. I think it's it should be a mandatory read. It's awesome. And the thing that always sticks with me is, right, here's Mike Matheny, retiring major leaguer, future major league manager, comes home to coach youth baseball, and he lays out, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to let kids try every position. I'm going to let kids bat any order. There's going to be a sort of a values component to what we're doing, right? He lays all this out. We're not going to go to a tournament every single weekend. We're actually going to practice and get better. And 3 people left.
Gone.
Right? So they left the former major league player who is volunteering to coach their kids' baseball team to go chase something else.
Yeah, insane.
Right?
Insane.
That's insane, right? And instead of going, wow, what an opportunity for my child. And that's the sort of, the most viewed blog I ever wrote was called The Race to Nowhere in Youth Sports. And that's the race to nowhere right there.
That's exactly. He was making $6 million as a major league coach, comes back and coaches youth sports for free. And these parents said, well, these players.
It's not good enough for me.
Not good enough for me. I need
Not
better.
good enough for Johnny. My 10-year-old needs way more than Mike Matheny at this moment.
I need better, right? But I think you touched on it a little bit, which I think is really important. And that's understanding, why you're doing what you're doing and how you're going to do it as a coach. How do you think how do you believe the role of a coach has evolved over the years, and what are the qualities or skills? What do you think the qualities are that a coach must possess, or at least adapt and learn to be really successful?
Well, I mean, I got to imagine in your world of, business coaching, you come across unbelievable leaders. And I've come across unbelievable coaches through my work, whether it's working with teams and coaches directly or interviewing them on the podcast. And, we've had, anyone from Steve Kerr to Brad Stevens to Quinn Snyder, just to name the NBAers, to 2 World Cup winners. I mean, we've got to have well over 100, 150 NCAA championships amongst all the coaches we've interviewed. And I think everyone of those coaches would say that the most important thing is that coaches win the relationship game. Coaching is a relationship business. Leadership is a relationship business. It's not an X's and O's business, right? No, I can't imagine, too many CEOs get fired because they don't know, they're not smart enough about business. It's just they don't understand people. They can't get people to come together. They can't communicate. They can't inspire. They can't create collective action. And business and sport it's the same thing. It's how do I get human beings to chase after something together? And whether it's to win a game or to win a sales goal or, to create a new product, it's the same thing. And so the best coaches are masters at the relationship game. And, one of the things that I do, Chad, is I always ask, like if you list the 5 qualities of your best coach, almost every single person will put at least 4 of the 5 have nothing to do with knowledge of the sport. They have to do with that ability to connect. And I say to them, if you never had a good coach, like your best teacher or whatever, and it's the same thing, right? And then I say, and the problem in sport coaching is regardless of sport, if all the coaches say that 80, 90, even 100% of what makes a great coach are these qualities like caring, honesty, fun, approachable, motivational, demanding, passionate, you open up any coaching manual, soccer, hockey, basketball, where is that? It's not in there.
Nope.
Your daughter's first basketball coach, no one ever pulled him aside and said, this is what's going to matter.
Yeah.
Right?
That's right.
And it's not just dribbling or passing, right? It's connection. And so this is what we have to get across. This is like our mission at Changing the Game Project, is to help coaches realize that if you can connect, right? If you can spell the Google, you can get any practice in any sport right now, right?
Yeah.
It's just, can I connect? Can I build relationships? Can I build trust? And if I can do that, then I'm going to be pretty effective.
Yeah, I could not agree. And it sounds like you've been in our corporate meetings on how we coach our people, because it's the exact same way. We focus on we tell people the difference is you coach the person, you manage the position, and the idea of, I think that a lot of people miss that. There's a movie called Patch Adams with Robin Williams, and it's a great line in the movie, one of my favorite lines of any movie. And he's fighting to keep his seat in medical school, and he said, if you treat the patient, you'll win some and lose some. But if you treat the person, you win every time. And the concept is the same. I think that there's too many position managers out there and not people coaches. And I think that's the difference. And the difference is, can you understand that person at a relationship level, have a high EQ? A lot of our coaches that I see in sport, and even in the corporate world that we deal with more so, they have a very high sport IQ. They have a very low relationship EQ. And that's the disconnect. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree. But it's because, I think, first of all, in sport, what happens a lot is we take someone who is an athlete, and then the next day it's like, okay, now you're a coach, as if that doesn't require a different skill set. Right? That's like saying, hey, you had knee surgery, so tomorrow you're doing the knee surgery. Like, no, I need a whole different skill set for that. And so I truly believe that this is one of the things. This is where people need the most training, and that these things that make up EQ, these words that we've used around connection and all that, they're also skills, right? And if it's a skill, it means it can be developed. And maybe it comes more naturally to some people because of the way they were raised and the environment that they grew up in and the way that they were coached. They're very aware of these things. But if I wasn't aware of them, I can still develop them. And I might never be as good a communicator as you, or as inspirational as, someone else's, but I can still, right? I can still get better at that skill. And I think a lot of people have this fixed mindset to those, that's just not me, right? That's not me. And it's like, what if your player said, well, I just don't dribble with my left hand? You wouldn't say that's okay. You'd be like, well, that's because you need to learn, Well, you need to learn to communicate better. You need to learn to, what inspires people. You need to learn to actually listen and see what your people are saying.
Yeah, I think to your point, and you talk a little bit about this in a way in your book, is that I think most coaches focus on growing the skill in the
Yeah.
sport, but not in the act of coaching. And so, like, all right, so I'm a basketball coach. I'm going to watch video after video after video of how to do crossover drills, or how to do layups, or how to shoot a foul shot, and how to create better game plans and create better plays, which is all great. You're learning the skill, but how do you communicate? And coaching is not about knowing the skill, and you talked about that a second ago. It's about understanding how to influence and getting the people that you are coaching to buy in and to want to listen to you.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that? Like, the act of
Yeah.
coaching is, you have to have a skill. You have to increase the skill of how to coach, not how to know the sport better, or whatever it is you are coaching.
Who cares what I know if I can't teach it, right? And if they can't do it, if they haven't learned it, that's on me, right? And so because I taught it doesn't mean they learned it. And this is where a lot of coaches get stuck. Well, we went over this. Well, if they can't do it, then clearly we have to go over it again. It's not their fault. It's our fault. We have to keep going. Or it's no one's fault. It's just part of the journey of learning, right? And failure and forgetting is all part of that journey. And this is, I think, one of the keys of, most coaches try to teach too much at a time. There's too much in a session, too much information, too much, right? Watch any kid's sporting event, and your halftime talk, anything over 30 seconds is over, right? Like, it's gone, right? Ask the kids at the end of your halftime talk, what did I just talk about? You're very lucky if you get anything back, right? And so you're doing that for yourself, not for them. So make one point or you make none at all, right? Use practice to teach. Repeat it, spacing. Quiz them by saying, can they do it again? Interleave things. These are all the proven principles of learning that we need to incorporate in our practices. Just because I run a drill doesn't mean they've actually learned anything.
Yeah, we have we have a lot of things here, but one of the things is we're teaching coaches. So when we're coaching coaches, we say, most people coach until the person gets it right, and then they stop. When you should be coach until you can't get it wrong. Just keep on, right? Keep on over and over until it becomes a fundamental. This is, they can do it without even thinking. But the idea of I have to move fast because I have to get to the other 47 things in my practice take precedent over me going. So it's mile wide, inch deep, rather than inch wide, mile deep.
Totally. And then, just in my area that I live in sports, if you play an invasion game, if you play a game that has an opponent, especially a no boundary game like football or soccer or hockey or whatever, right? Those opponents are constantly influencing the decisions and the perception action of the thing. So when I see these coaches, coaching and there's no defenders, right? There's no opponent, and they're just drilling these things over and over and over of like, okay, and then I'm going to be able to plug it in. If I have two players kicking a soccer ball back and forth, I'm not teaching passing, I'm teaching kicking. I don't teach a person to pass until I add a defender, and then she has to realize, who do I pass it to? How hard do I pass it? What foot do I pass it to? Where do I move after I pass it, right? Where is the space? Like, that's passing. The other thing is just kicking. So people have broken down sport in the wrong places, and we give kids reps of the wrong thing, and then we think we're going to push it all back together on Saturday and plug it into the game, and it's a disaster because the thing they practice, they actually are never seeing in a real game with a defender and an opponent.
Yeah, and then the coach gets mad.
The coach gets mad. We went over this
practice for 2 hours.
We worked on this all week. No, actually, there wasn't a 6'4" person standing in my face trying to block my shot.
Right. You didn't tell me what to do when this happens.
Yeah, when I dribbled around that cone, it didn't actually reach out and move towards me.
So, oh, so true. One of the let me ask you a question. In your book, you mentioned this book, which I think is a staple book for any corporate coach. Really, I just think it's a book for life. And it's Mindset by Cal Dweck.
Mm.
How critical is that in for coaches to understand the difference between a fixed and a growth mindset, and how it influences how we challenge our kids, how they learn, how we coach? Where does mindset play into coaching?
I think it's absolutely critical, and I think what the research shows is that as a parent, as a coach, as a leader, I influence the mindset of those around me, right? So if I am, talking about, focusing on the process and the work that they're doing, I'm focusing on this mindset that, anything can be learned, anything can be improved. That's the growth mindset, right? The kid who comes to you and says, I failed my math test, I'm not good at math, is very different than the kid who says, well, I failed my math test, I need to study harder next time, right? Those two different mindsets lead to very different, one's given up because it's all based on talent.
Yep.
And one has said, no, I control part of this, my effort and my input can influence the outcome.
Yep.
And so I don't think there's anyone who will argue that the fixed mindset is a path to growth or it is a high performance path. Now, this doesn't mean that someone with a fixed mindset can't achieve very high things, but I don't think they ever truly, unpack their true potential.
Yeah.
Right. And so I think it's a critical concept. I think it's one that should be introduced to parents when the kids are really young, because I think it really makes a difference when you turn the focus of kids onto, look how hard I worked versus I either got it or I don't.
Yeah, I think our tagline here at Cannonball, it's on all of our swag. It's something that we preach on every call. We start on every call, and that's divorce the outcome and fall in love with the behaviors. And
Mm-hmm.
this idea, people at first are like, what are you talking about? Don't worry about the outcome. I said, that's not what I said. I said, divorce the outcome, fall in love with the behaviors.
Mm-hmm.
The challenge is that the gold is in the behaviors. The goal,
Right.
like that's what I can control. I can't control the outcome 100%, but I can control the behaviors 100%. Why is it that people focus so much on solely the outcome and not the behaviors?
Well, I love two things that you said. I love that your tagline, which is really cool. And one of my favorites was a very high level college AD who was also a 3-time national champion coach said to us, outcome aware but purpose and process driven. Right? So we're aware of the outcome, but we're driven by the process of getting better, and we're driven by our why.
Yeah.
And that's what gets us to that outcome. And so, when we say forget the outcome, it doesn't mean the outcome doesn't matter.
Correct.
It just means there's so many other things that control the outcome, especially in sport, the weather, the officials, the opponent, right? We could play our best game ever and still lose to, a great team.
That's right. You
You
can
know,
also play the worst game ever and still beat a
and
subpar team.
and win, right? And win, and it doesn't mean that I got better today, right? So I love that idea, and I also love that you use the word behaviors, because I think this is what we really, really have to teach leaders, and what we really, really have to teach coaches is that we're in the behavior business. We are shaping behavior. Right? What I do when I take a group of 8 and 9-year-olds and I tell their parents, the first thing we're going to learn to do is listen when the coach is coaching, right? Is respect each other, is we're going to learn how to practice. Like, your kids have no idea how to practice right now, right? It's just a free-for-all out here. Well, we're going to get that little bit of discipline and learning, and then you're going to see them getting good. But it's going to take me a long time to do this. And so I think anyone in coaching is in the behavior shaping business.
That's right.
And I think we all know this, that if we get the behaviors right and my players show up and they're focused and they work hard and they're not afraid to make mistakes, right? And they're respectful and they treat each other well and create an environment that people want to be a part of, and we do that every single day, we're going to get good.
That's right.
Right. And if we don't do those things, then practices aren't that impactful and we're not going to get good. And so the teams that win championships are usually the ones that get the behaviors right and then repeat them day after day after day after day. That's excellence right there.
That's exactly right. And to me, this is it's the probabilities. It's all probabilities. And what this means to us is like, listen, we can't guarantee 100. We're talking about in the corporate world, but in the corporate world, we're saying, listen, you're not going to win every sale, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to guarantee winning at every sale, every level. Like in the history of major league sports, take football, basketball, soccer, baseball, women's or men's. There have been very, very few perfect seasons. I can't even think. I'm saying Patriots had a perfect regular season, then lose in the Super Bowl. There's been very few perfect seasons, and to my knowledge, there's never been a perfect franchise. It's never lost a game, and so it's the probabilities game, and that is, can we put ourselves in position with the highest probability to win more than we lose, right? And how do you do that? Well, I can control my practice, how I show up, the mindset I have. Am I ready? And to your point is, if I focus on the behaviors. I focus on the behaviors and I put myself in position to win more than I lose and to show up ready to play or whatever it may be. At some point, I can be a lot more comfortable with the outcome, still learning how to extract, education from the wins, education from losses, to reapply to the behaviors. But ultimately, it goes back to behaviors. But I think so many people, and I see coaches do it all the time. Somebody scores a goal in youth soccer, and watch the sidelines. People go crazy. There's 9-5, but the person who didn't score the goal doesn't get nearly the same accolades. We had a player had played for me for a number of years, and I just happened to, and she was a really good player. And I just happened to walk by her parents before one game, and they said, "Now go earn a lot of money." And they kind of like did a quick like, "What? What did you say?" And so she walked in, and she was 13 at the time, 14, and I said, "What did you say to her?" And you could tell immediately they knew they were in trouble or something. I said, "What did that mean?" And she goes, "Well, it's nothing, but we pay her for every point she scores." I said, "Oh, wait, what?" I said, "So if she scores a lot of points, she gets a lot of money. What if she doesn't score any points?" She said, "Well, then she doesn't get any money." And it's, we're not mad at her. She just doesn't make any money. I said, "What if I don't need her to score a lot of points? What if I need her to rebound? What if her day today is about having assists? What if it's about just she was the defender that I put on a box and won. She was
She was the one. Yeah,
the one." And I said, "Listen, I love you dearly, but if you ever do that again, you can't be part of this team. Like there's just we can't, because the people are so fixated on outcome. And what people say to me is, well, we're an outcome-driven society. The rest doesn't matter."
yeah, and then what happens is you start a Ponzi scheme because the only thing matters is making money, right?
Bernie Madoffs of the world.
Yeah, exactly, right? So then, so if the outcome is the only thing that matters, then you're also teaching your child, then I better do anything to win.
That's right.
So I should cheat, right? I should cut corners. And what's I should do performance enhancing drugs. I should this, I should that, like whatever it is, I should cut down I should Tanya Harding to Nancy Kerrigan, right? Like all these things say, if the outcome is the only thing that matters, I'm that. And sport is, what we do in youth sport is sport for development. Professional sport, that's sport for entertainment. You are judged on whether you win or not, right? College sport is really sport for entertainment, but it is also still sport for development, right? But youth sport is definitely sport for development. And so the things that I am teaching that kid by saying, right, I'll pay you for every point, is don't be a good teammate, right? Don't look to make the extra pass or pass to the open person, because I'm not rewarded for that. And eventually, if that's the lesson I've learned over and over and over, it doesn't play well in real life. And, like this was kind of when we wrote this new book, The Champion Teammate, Jerry and I, like we talked about this, like you're a part of teams your whole life, right? Your family, your church, your community, your work team, military unit, whatever it is, like we are part of teams our whole life. And we're always told to be a great teammate. We don't really like teach people how to be a great teammate. And so we wanted to write like this little guidebook of like, well, this is how you become a great teammate. These are the things that you do that make you a great teammate. And if you're a great teammate, and you know this from the corporate world, right? If you learn to be a great teammate on your basketball team or your soccer team, and you carry that over into the corporate world, you will always be in demand.
Always.
Someone will always want you on their team because she makes people around her better. He pushes us all. He listens. He always has great ideas. He's not afraid to do the dirty work. Like all these qualities. She's humble, right? She's kind.
Yeah.
Boom.
Those people have are driven, and they're not driven by it, but what you hear is we have, there's two types of virtues. There's career virtues and there's eulogy virtues. And those people have eulogy virtues, right?
Mm-hmm.
Career virtues are they sold a lot of houses, they made a lot of revenue, they moved up the corporate chain. Eulogy virtues are the ones that inspire people to want to be around you. And I'm a full believer in that. So let's talk about that book real quick, and that is How to Be a Great Teammate. What do you think? And I'm excited to read the book. It comes out in a couple of days, so by the time this podcast airs, it's already come out. So make sure you get a copy. What are the key attributes needed in being a really good teammate in any of the cultures, work culture, sport culture, whatever? What are the key attributes, do you think?
I mean, I think if I had to encompass it all in one, it's look out for your teammates first, and they look out for you, right? If I have your best interest in mind, then your skills, right? Your skills, your speed, your strength, your shooting, whatever it is, benefit me. And if I'm looking out for you and I'm the best player, right, but I have your best interest in mind, then you're going to support me and help me and do these things. And so we broke the book up into sort of three sections. And the first one's like connecting and winning the relationship game, which we talked about on the coaching side, but it's just as important on the teammate side. So how do I build great relationships and things like that? The second part is competing. So how do we create an environment where we're competing, where we're pushing, where we're constantly, getting better? And then the third part is lead. So when do I lead? When do I take a step back? But what are the things that great leaders do on a team that get all the team bonded together, moving in the same direction? And so, like I said, like we did like really short, quick chapters on this book. And then everything ends with, there's a place to write and some discussion questions. And every chapter starts with a story of coaches that Jerry and I have worked with or interviewed, or athletes, a Messi or, Tim Duncan or people like that I think just talk about great, qualities of great teammates. What is it that made them a great teammate, and how can you, what can you do as an athlete to start doing some of these things, and what are some things that you're doing that maybe you need to stop doing to be a better teammate in this area? And so yeah, we both liked it. It came out really good. We wrote it pretty quickly because it was just kind of a book that poured out of us from all the time we've spent with high performing teams.
The idea of being a great teammate and all the things you just mentioned. Do you think being a great teammate is a skill that can really be sharpened and grown, or do you think it's a personality trait of I'm a extrovert, I'm an introvert, I'm like? Do you think it's something that you can take the maybe right now on paper the worst teammate, and with time, dedication, and the right coaching can become a phenomenal teammate?
Yeah, I mean, I think the type of teammate that we appear in the sports realm is very much shaped by how we're raised and what's the culture of our house. And, in my home life, if we're all pulling together and pulling our weight, or are we taught, to be selfish and get what's mine? So everyone comes to the table with a different skill set, but I don't think being an introvert or an extrovert has anything to do with being a great teammate, right? You just have, part of being a great teammate is recognizing that in someone. So for example, right, like some of us growing up, the night before a game, like I'm an extrovert, right? If you can't tell, right? So, the night before a game, the team getting together for a big dinner and all rah, 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 that to me gives me energy and ready. But if I'm an introvert, right, the way I get ready for that game, like let me go home, watch a movie, not talk to anyone, and just get my mind around this. That gives me energy. Well, as a teammate, like I used to think, oh, well, Chad, if that was you, you clearly don't care because you don't want to come to the team dinner. But really, you care just as deeply as I do. It's just that's not going to help you, right? And so it's this self-awareness, what drives me, this awareness of the needs of others. These are all the qualities. And I think anyone can become a better teammate. And when you're a great teammate, it only enhances the skill set that you bring with your speed, your strength, your shooting, whatever it is. But if you're a lousy teammate, you better be really special or you're not going to find a place, right? Dennis Rodman could find a place on the Bulls because he was really special at blocking shots and rebounding and defending. Right. And they said, can our culture sustain Dennis? Yes, we can. He'll win us a championship. But they couldn't have sustained two Dennis Rodmans on that team.
Nope, only one.
Only one.
Only one. All right, I only got a couple questions for you, but I want to get your. I'm gonna give you some names, and I want you to tell me your thoughts about them as a coach, and what do you think their attributes are that make them such a great coach, if you believe they are. Greg Popovich.
Whew, Greg. Well, he got lucky last night in the NBA draft, didn't he?
he certainly did. The number one, probably one, there's a debate now whether he's the number one prospect of all time, better than LeBron. We'll see.
We'll see. Only time will tell. But so his number one draft pick last night might make Greg Popovich a great coach again. No, clearly Greg Popovich is a great coach, right? You don't coach, win 50 games for 20 straight years, and then all of a sudden, NBA depends on talent. And if you don't have talent, you're not going to win. It doesn't matter how good a coach you are. So he didn't forget how to coach. It was in a down talent, and maybe now they're in a back upswing, right?
That's right.
But my favorite Greg Popovich quote was from Dan Coyle in his book, The Culture Code. And he said, one of his assistants says, he'll tell you the truth and he loves you to death.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think it's an amazing thing. Great coaches are truth tellers. And Greg Popovich is a truth teller. And the biggest mistake that we can make is we take what we see on TV. There's Greg Popovich getting in someone's face, yelling at a player.
That's right.
And we haven't seen the 99% of their interactions that allowed for that moment to happen.
That's right. We have no context.
Right? There's no context to that. And so if you see the context, what they say is, he's really good on team dinners and he's thoughtful about food and wine and he really connects with every single individual so that when he is in your face, he's doing this out of love. Right. And he's got my best interest in mind.
Yeah, he's radically candid. The book Radically Candid. He's earned that. I care personally, so I'm going to challenge you directly. But he's also, to your point, great coaches make those deposits so that they can make that withdrawal because they know at some point they're going to have to withdraw, but they're never going to get overdrawn. And what I believe about Greg Popovich, he doesn't get overdrawn because people don't leave him. People don't, wins champion after champion. And usually after a championship, somebody wins a championship, the team, goes all their separate ways because they're getting high paid from other teams. His people almost always return. So
right. And it's no accident, I think, that Steve Kerr played under Pop and learned a lot and brought a lot of that to the Warriors. And one of the best stories that Steve ever told me was like when the year, when they lost KD and he went he tore his Achilles and he left, and Klay Thompson got hurt and was out, and Steph Curry, and they went from, the championship to the worst team in the league. And he said, and we got to trade deadline. And he goes, and in the NBA, if you are not going to the playoffs, the trade deadline, everyone wants out.
Yeah. Right.
Everyone wants out. And he goes, and nobody wanted to leave. Even though we had the worst team, we still had a great culture and an eye on the future, and great relationships. So yeah.
This is the video coming back. All right, next one. Nick Saban.
Yeah. I don't know a lot about Nick Saban, but I think clearly he's had so much sustained success that you can't argue that he's a phenomenal coach. I think one thing that we can see from the outside is how many of his assistants have gone on to great things. So he's very good at spotting talented assistant coaches and developing them and then moving them on. And I think this is what, great leaders, what do they say? Like A-level people hire A-level people and B-level people hire C-level people, right? So he surrounds himself with great people knowing that he'll lose them.
Yeah.
But while he's got them, they're going to be amazing, right? And so that would be one of his qualities. Number two, I think he has super high standards. And that's really hard. And, like Kirby Smart, obviously one of his assistants now, 2-time national champion at Georgia, Kirby Smart, after they won the championship this year, his on-field interview after, he said, there's no entitlement in this locker room. And if you don't have entitlement in your locker room, you always have a chance. And I think that's what Saban has done really well over the years, even though they've had all this success, is he fights against the entitlement and keeps the humility and let's do the little things. Yeah. So I'd love to talk to him someday. I'd be fascinated.
Yeah, same here. John Wooden.
I mean, clearly, considered by many people as the greatest coach in any sport of all time. I've done a lot of reading about John Wooden and his, John Wooden, I think one of the most fascinating things about him is how he evolved as a coach, right? So he talked about when he started coaching, most of his athletes were coming back from the Korean War, right? So they were very much yes, sir, no, sir, discipline. You're the boss. I'm the private. Tell me what to do. And then came Bill Walton and Lou Alcindor, right?
That's right.
And an era where people said, well, why? Well, why? And they pushed against that. And he was able to evolve from a basketball standpoint. He was able to evolve from a human standpoint to understand the next generation. But I think the most important John Wooden quote, one that doesn't get quoted a lot, was when he was done and they said, what was your secret? And he said, I had a lot of love in my coaching. I had a lot of love in my coaching.
Yeah. To me, he is the gold standard. Again, obviously, never met him, don't know more than I could read about him, or I've listened to him about him, but
This is sitting, I don't know if you share the video, but this is sitting up on my desk.
Oh, yeah.
So there you go.
Right. the wooden pyramid. It's the gold standard by all things coached. So I love your take on that. All right, 2 more questions. So where do people find you? Again, I know you have this new book coming out, so everybody needs to get this new book, The Champion Teammate. It'll come out, but where do people follow you? Obviously, tell them about the podcast. It's I got to listen to a bunch of episodes getting ready for this interview, but let's plug all your stuff.
Thanks, man. So the mothership is definitely, the website is changingthegameproject.com. And from there you can find links to books, online courses, bringing in speakers. Jerry and I actually do a 3-day conference coming up here in August, 3-day leadership, culture building, inner game conference. It's in Denver, Colorado this year. We actually have Phil Jackson is going to beam in for us, and Steve, and then Cindy Timschel, a Hall of Fame lacrosse coach, they're all teaching with us. So super cool event. But changingthegameproject.com has all that. Twitter and Instagram is at CTG Project HQ. and Facebook, just look for Change the Game Project. And then all the books are on Amazon and Barnes & Noble, and any place you can get books. You can find The Champion Teammate, which is a brand new one, Every Moment Matters, which is the book I wrote for coaches specifically, and then Changing the Game, which was sort of my first parent-coach book.
Yeah, best-selling books. You don't have to be a coach of youth sports to get something out of these books. If you're a parent, if you're a friend, if you're a leader at work, there's a ton of useful information. All right, last question, John. Again, thanks for coming on. I know your time is valuable, so I really appreciate it. Last question, that is 50, 60 years from now, when you leave this earth, what do you want your contribution to have been?
Man, that guy was really old. That would be, I guess, number one. I don't think a lot about that kind of stuff. It's a great question, and I think just for me that he cared deeply about kids, and making it great. And I would like my contribution to be, like, people ask me this all the time, Chad, and I guess this is the best way I can answer this, is they say, is the work you're doing making a difference, right? And maybe we haven't moved the needle on society, but when people like you say, man, I read this book and it changed the way that I coached. I read this book and it saved my relationship with my kids. I watched your TED Talk and it totally changed the way that I approached everything, and it changed our school, or it changed our athletic department, whatever it is. That's how I take those are the real paychecks that I get, for sure. And so I would just like to be someone that maybe started a movement to, as we say on the website, put a little more play back in play ball.
That's awesome. Kelly Dunn, the person who recommended the book to me, I texted her today and I said, hey, I'm interviewing John O'Sullivan. You recommended that book, Changing the Game. And she said, I recommend it. She has 2 young children. She said, I give that book and I recommend that book to every parent of every team my kid has ever been on. I give it to every coach that they ever coach, because I think it's a fundamental requirement for everybody that has kids in sports to read that book before they allow their kids to play in sports or be coached. So Kelly Dunn,
Kelly.
There's a lot of Kelly Dunns in the world right now. I'm telling you, because of your book.
Kelly, you're hired. You're hired.
she's your new sales.
My new marketing director.
Marketing director. That's exactly right. Well, thanks, John. I appreciate it. And everybody, make sure you check out his conference. If you're available, go to his conference. If you're not available, or if you are available, buy the books, read the books, recommend the books, and listen to the podcast. Thanks, John.
Chad, this was awesome. Thanks for all the great questions. What a great conversation.
Thanks. Likewise. Bye.
You've been listening to Cannonball Mindset. To ensure you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.